Okay, so now we are going to learn about the use of or and in Spanish. So let's give it a try. So the word for or is o. So simple, or, o. So for example, gato o perro, cat or dog. But there are some times when o changes. For example, o changes to u when o is followed by a word that also starts with the same sound of o or ho, because the h is silent in Spanish, so it would still sound like o. So whenever you have o and then it's followed by another sound of o, then you have to change the o to u. So for example, 7 u 8 semanas, 7 or 8 weeks, 7 u 8. And the reason behind this is because it's a little hard to pronounce the o followed by another o. For example, 7 o 8 semanas, 7 o 8 o 8. So it's a little hard to pronounce the double o, so that o changes to u. So it's easier to pronounce 7 u 8 semanas, 7 u 8, instead of 7 o 8. So yeah, that's how it works. And let's try some examples. Casa o apartamento. So apartamento starts with the letter O, so we can say house or apartment. We can say casa o apartamento. O. And the next one. Hugo o Jose. Hugo or Jose. Hugo o Jose. So most of the times you would tend to use o, because it's more likely that the next word is going to be a word that is not o. But in the few cases where the word also starts with o, we would use u, but it's not so common, but that's the rule. For example, una cosa u otra, one thing or another. Una cosa u otra, one thing or another. So it's a little hard to pronounce una cosa o otra, but there are some people who would actually pronounce it like that. But that is not the correct grammatical way. But if you happen to pronounce it like that, it will kind of just go through the people's heads, like they're not gonna notice it. Because some people say it, but if you're like a foreigner and you say it, nobody's gonna notice, because sometimes it's common to say it wrong. And even in native speakers, they also say it wrong sometimes. But the official way is to change o to u. And another example. Minutos u horas. Minutes or hours. So horas starts with h, but it's followed by o. So that's the reason we have to change to u, because the h is silent, so it basically skips the h to the next letter, which is o. If that h was followed by a word that is not o, then you would use o. But in this case, it's o, so you change o for u. Okay, another example. Manzanas o plátanos. Apples or bananas. And another one. Perro u oso. Dog or bear. Perro u oso. So these are quite simple. And something similar is also used with and. So the word for and is e. And, e. For example, Hugo y Marta. Hugo and Martha. Hugo y Marta. And e changes to e whenever it's followed by a word that starts with the same e sound. So the same e or he, because the h is basically silent, so it skips to the next word, to the next letter, which is I, e. So in this case, E becomes E. For example, Roberto e Iván. Roberto and Ivan. Roberto e Iván. So we do not pronounce Roberto y Iván because it's a little hard to say it. So it changes to E. And there are some exceptions, however, so this is when it becomes hard. So you keep the Y whenever it's followed by a diphthongo. And diphthongo basically means that there are two vowels together. For example, E-I-A, I-E, I-O, or I-U. So whenever you have that I followed by another vowel, the I followed by a vowel, you keep the Y. For example, nieve y hielo, snow and ice. And you change it whenever it's not followed by a vowel. For example, catolicismo e hinduismo. So IN is not the double vowels issue here. And the other one, limpieza e higiene. So higiene is I and G, so it's not double vowels. So it stays... Oh, so it basically changes. It has to change. It stays the same if it's a double vowel. It changes if it's not a double vowel. So nieve y hielo, double vowel. Hinduismo IN, no double vowel, so it changes. So those are that's one exception. And another exception is when it's a foreign word that sounds like E. For example, email, it makes that E sound. So you have to change it because you would not say nombre y email because it's harder. So you would say nombre e email. So email starts with the letter E, but the sound it makes is the same as E. So if it's a foreign word, you have to change it to E. Nombre e email. And the next one, there's another exception. When it's followed by E or HI, E, but it has a different sound from E. So it's not like E, E. So that I makes a different sound. And this is common also with foreign words. For example, Jorge y Hilton. So the name Hilton sounds like he. It doesn't sound like E. So therefore it remains as Y. Another example, Hugo y Hillary. So Hillary sounds like he, starts with he, therefore you can keep the Y because it doesn't make that double E sound like Hugo y Hillary. If the name was Hillary, then you would change it, but it's Hillary, which sounds like he. So that's another exception. Okay, let's try some examples. Juan y María. Juan and Maria. So Y, the letter Y stays E because Maria starts with M. Juan y María. Another example. Pedro e Isabela. Pedro and Isabella. So Isabella starts with E, so you change the Y, the E to E. So in this case, Pedro e. You will not say Pedro y Isabela because it makes the double E sound. And the next one. Mi mamá y yo. My mom and I. Yo starts with J, Y, with the Y, so it sounds like J, so it doesn't change. It remains as Y. As the letter Y, E. And this one we have a foreign word, which is EasyJet. So EasyJet, the airplane company, sounds like E. It starts with that E sound. For example, vamos a viajar con Ryanair e EasyJet. So in this case, you have to change the Y to E because it makes the double E sound. So you have to change it to an E. We will travel with Ryanair and EasyJet. Okay, and that's it for this one. And well, one more thing. If you go to to a Latin American country and you don't know which one to say, you can just stay with the classic one, the O, which is the normal one, or the Y. Even though if you say it wrong, people would understand because O is very, very common. They use it with more than 90% of the words. And Y, E, is used with the same. So if you're in doubt, just go for the normal one with the O for or the E for and. But just so you know, there's the real formal way, and if you say it wrong, people will still understand you. The only thing you cannot do is that use the U or E for everything, because people will be like, what? So that's my recommendation. If you're in doubt, go for O and E. Okay, thanks for watching. So now it's your turn to practice Spanish. You can find the lessons Quizlet by going into the lecture resources folder. Thanks for watching.